Okay. So, like I said, Deputy Commissioner Macarone will be joining us in a minute. So I'm just going to move to item number 2 on the agenda, which was to review and approve the meeting minutes from the August 18th meeting. Just a little sidebar here on this. We've been kind of experimenting with how we want to do these meeting minutes. And we provided a link in the August meeting for the previous May meeting, but I noticed that it was a Google Drive link, and I had a couple of folks telling me that they weren't able to open it. So I've now tried to use a different, we use a OneDrive or a SharePoint, and a couple of folks have requested it. So apparently when you click on that link to review the meeting minutes, it will ask you to request permission to view the minutes, and that's something that I can govern. But I'm certainly open to some suggestions here. We're trying to make this easier, not harder. But if there's any issue or problem with the meeting minutes, if you could please record that in the chat or raise your hand. And if not, then I will just simply move on to item number 3. And David and Jess, I'm just going to ask if you can monitor the chat for me. Okay, so seeing no objection, I'm going to go ahead and move to what I think is going to, I hope, is going to stir some conversation here. So as you know, we were able to finally graduate the spring class from fundamentals, and we finished that on October 30th. And for those of you who weren't aware, we did weeks 1 and 2 in March in person in Albany. And then once COVID-19 changed our world, we sent the class home, and we then worked through the summer to try and convert this into a virtual platform. And we were actually able to use this WebEx training platform that I've got you all in now. You have a sense of, how things look, some of the features that were going on just firsthand if you hadn't really experienced this. So we graduated that class. We had, I want to say, 32 folks graduate from about 16 or 17 different counties. And, certainly I'm going to ask for David and Jeff to chime in at some point, but I would say that overall it was a successful venture. It was definitely a challenge to try to do this online rather than in person, particularly this time because this curriculum was just being piloted. We had never delivered this before, even in person, and so we had no gauge really to kind of figure out how it was flowing. But we've taken a lot of notes, and also just so that you're aware, I know they're going to report out on their own academies, but kind of in the same time frame, we had Westchester, Monroe, Erie, all doing their own academies, and most of them did in person, small groups, and actually Nassau did one in person too. But I think it was Monroe who did a blended model. So when we get to that part of the agenda, I'm going to ask you guys to comment on how you felt it all went. But what I put in here is, a discussion item because I really want to run this past the committee and let everybody just kind of take in, this table that we have here, some pros and cons. There are lots and lots of considerations. There's no doubt from when we met last time that there's a need for another class. That is a given, and it could probably run tomorrow, and, we could fill it. But having said that, we also need to be mindful of the time it might take. There's a lot of considerations here, and so I want to be able to open this up for conversation using either the chat or the raise your hand function. So let me just run through this chart with you. So we put this together basically as kind of a collective group in the training unit, just thinking about the things, having done it both ways, thinking about the things that would really kind of land in the pros and landing in the cons. And so if we're talking about a virtual delivery, some of the really big savings here have to do with travel costs. That's a given. And that's a big deal for some of you, maybe more than others on the call. But on average, coming from wherever in New York State to Albany, outside of toll, this is just really about meals and per diem and hotels. The cost for tolls also need to be factored in, but it's roughly $2,500 to $3,000 per student to come and do and in-person training. And so that's an immediate cost savings when we do this virtually. And as you found out, we can, students can participate in this type of a platform, whether they're at home or in their office. And of course, there are some challenges on both sides of that coin as well. We had some people who, didn't have, a really good, stable internet connection, myself included, all the time from home. We actually had a power outage that took several of us down. But ultimately, it's something that is a little bit more flexible in terms of where you can actually attend the academy. And in terms of scheduling, this time, this first time, we were really kind of using our best guess. We knew what the hours in person were going to be. We knew what all the research was telling us about virtual deliveries and that you really shouldn't keep students in front of a computer screen for more than 90 minutes at a time. But we also, we're shooting in the dark a little bit here because we had never done it. But I think, in the beginning, we had some difficulty with sticking directly to the schedule, ran over a couple of times, but I think we smoothed that out and we were able to stick to our time frames fairly well. But I think moving forward, there would be even more flexibility, an ability to be able to plan for that type of scheduling, in future classes. There's also, when we talk about the exams, if you remember in-person exams, on Fridays we always had our exams. The students then would kind of just be waiting in limbo. Most would hang out in the hallway and just be biting their nails. And we as a staff would be in there trying to just feverishly grade these exams and try to get results out. And then, of course, there was always issues of retesting and things of this nature. With this platform, you have an instant test score result. So as soon as that student submits it, their score pops up to them as well as to us. And so we're able to kind of address those things instantaneously. So that, I think, is a very big pro, at least for our purposes. You also, we're looking right now, obviously we haven't looked at weeks 1 and 2 online. So that's what my team and I are starting to engage in. But we think that there may be some portions that we might be able to do, maybe pre-record and get those out there so people can work at their own pace. We don't know. We're exploring that option. It's something I want to kind of hear your feedback on too. But that's an option that might be available to us, and that might allow for some more flexibility in the scheduling. It certainly is something that, does not exist in an in-person realm, at least not right now. And there's a potential to run more than one academy, more than 2 academies, a year. So when we do this in person, we typically do them in March and October. We're hoping that if we're able to consider some pre-recorded pieces, we're able to actually nail down our time frames and maybe even pull together resources and instructors from other academies. We may be actually able to run academies, kind of back to back to back. So those are the pros in the virtual world. I don't want to take too much time. I know you can all read. But obviously, on the opposite side, it's going to take more time. Okay, it took us to do what was essentially 8 days in person. It spread out over the course of the month. And we had a lot of concerns that were voiced, and rightly so. But again, this was trying to adhere to those principles of no more than 90 minutes at a time. But that certainly is something that, we have to try and consider as we move forward. The technology, having capabilities for both audio and video. In the next class, this is something very important. If we remain virtual, and I think we will, I think everybody's probably of that same opinion, especially now with things going backwards in as far as the COVID increases that are happening across the state. There's a lot more concerns going on right now than perhaps before. And so we had made a decision internally that our next class is not going to be more than 15 students. It's just too difficult to navigate that many people online and do it effectively. We managed to get through those last weeks, but it was not easy. And some of the feedback that we got from students themselves told us exactly what we thought, that it was too much. It was too much to do, too many people to try and engage. So we will be limiting that in the future. Student engagement, of course, will be more difficult, and so on and so forth. So I'm going to pause here and see if there's anything in the chat or any hands raised, if you want to just give me some feedback on the virtual side. All right, so I'm looking in the chat. Kelly, okay, Kelly's talking about the meeting minutes. William Collins, we have 3 individuals completed all aspects of firearms, but have yet to start FPP. Okay, so we can talk about the waiver issue in a second, though, if you just give me a moment. But is there anybody who has any question, comment, feedback about the virtual delivery? I really want to hear your opinions. So if you can raise your hand or put it in the chat, I will unmute you. And the raise your hand function is right toward the bottom right-hand corner. You'll see a little hand. It's next to a green check mark. Bill, I see you hit the green check mark. I'm not sure if you were trying to raise your hand, but did you have something to add?
Well, just for expedited purposes, I just think the virtual would probably be the best for us as it stands right now. But personally, I think in-person is probably the best means of getting the information across to the other person. That way you know that that person's understanding what's actually going through. And again, I understand what we're tied down with right now currently with these COVID restrictions, but if I had my druthers, I'd say in person, but for expedited purposes, the virtuals is what we need right now.
Yeah, and thank you for that feedback, Bill. I'm going to go ahead and mute you back up. I agree, and you know, unfortunately, I don't have any idea, nor do you, when we might be able to do things in person. And although some of the other Academy sites were able to do that, most were operating with pretty small numbers. And if we decide that we're going to go to 15, that possibility might exist. But at present, at least for our site in the Alfred E. Smith building, outside visitors, other than DCJS staff, are not allowed in the building. So even if I wanted to convene, you know, a small group of 10 to 15 in person, I could not. I would have to try to find an alternate location, which we've explored. We've looked at some of the local, like the Zone 5 Academy for police. We've looked at another place locally that has some really good training space, but they're also in the same predicament. They're not allowing folks from the outside agencies to utilize their space. So that's kind of the druthers that we find ourselves in here in Albany. Any other comments about the virtual delivery?
Hey, there's a couple questions in the chat.
Okay. Okay, so Terry, although the virtual delivery took much longer, it's a money saver. Current environment, if it's at least part of it is able to be done virtually, that would be great, okay. And Melissa, Orange County has laptops with mics and cameras that can go virtual. We have 11 people that will be permanent without ever being trained. 11 people that will be permanent without ever being trained. Yeah, Melissa, and I remember Orange County identifying the immediate need, and I know you're ready to go. Okay, and then one of our own staff, why only 15 max for virtual? So to answer that question, we did 30. We started out with 33 or 34. We ended up with 32. And the way that the curriculum is developed, if you've used this type of platform before and you understand the concept of breakout rooms and you understand the dynamics of trying to do case activities and exercises, the larger the group, the more difficult it really is to manage. And I know the folks who are instructors in this realm understand exactly what I'm saying. Keeping those numbers smaller in a virtual platform requires fewer management of breakouts. And keep in mind, if there's 3 of us in the training unit, we often had 5, 6, 8 different breakout rooms depending on the activities, and we're bouncing around like ping pong balls and not really able to give a lot of attention. Different than when you're in a classroom and you've got tables spread out, you can walk over and monitor those and kind of gauge people. You raise your hand, you immediately respond. It's not that smooth in the virtual world, and so for that reason, that's why we made a decision to kind of cut those numbers in half, roughly 15 for the virtual, and then hopefully we can add additional classes on there.
Yeah,
so
and if I can add in, Patty, I think the main thing is it becomes when you have 25, 30 or more students in a virtual realm, it starts to become unmanageable. Even though we had people on video and even they had audio capabilities, trying to respond to everybody's questions, if people need to be unmuted, and when they're going into breakout sessions, being able to bounce around in them, and we only have 3 people in the training unit, it was very, very taxing on us and the other instructors, so we would definitely never do that many again.
Yeah. Okay, so on the in-person, I think, I don't need to run through this. You all know what the in-person is. You know basically what the pros and cons here are. And I think, in terms of the cons, we know the travel costs are going to be the biggest deal. The other thing that's coming up that I'm trying to address, and again, I'm going to ask some of the other anchor sites to comment on this. They do it a little differently, but for example, there are a couple academies that run when their new hires come in, they are not given caseloads yet. They don't have outside work. Their job is the academy, and then once they leave the academy, they're assigned caseloads and work. Now, that's a wonderful ideal, probably not possible for everybody, but we are hoping that maybe if we're able to offer the academy in even a blended form, to expedite the ability for new hires to get through the academy, it would be a tremendous help for everyone. I can't tell you how frustrating it was for the students to try to have to be logged in for all the different sessions and do all the different work here and navigate the same things that we were navigating while carrying their caseloads, while worrying about court dates. It shouldn't be. It shouldn't be that way. If we can try to improve this system so that we can get folks through, almost like think about the police, right? They come out of the academy, they do their FTO, they don't get assigned cases, they're not out there on the street typically until their training is done. And so I am really working very hard to try and figure out a way to offer it that way so that the students don't have to be, and you don't, as supervisors and directors, don't have to be concerned about these competing interests, right? So it's difficult enough for these, I keep calling them kids and I have to stop doing it, for the new students who come into the academy. It's difficult enough for them to try and focus on that work. If they're in person, I've noted here that students have to plan for childcare. Being away from home, it's a big deal, right? For some of them, they're brand new parents. There's so many things, and now we're adding COVID restrictions, and it goes on and on and on. So, for a whole lot of reasons, mostly right now because it's just more practical with the COVID restrictions, the virtual is making sense. It's something that, I would really like to be able to tighten up, and in fact, I'm trying to navigate using a different platform, more like a college or university, like a Blackboard or a Google Classroom, where it's suited for this sort of thing. We had to try to retrofit WebEx functions to be able to run this academy, and I think we did a pretty good job, all things considered, but it's not ideal, right? And so these are the things that we're working on our end. But I wanted to be able to throw that out to all of you and give you a chance to comment. So before I kind of leave this and move to the local academies, I just want to see if there's any other thoughts, anybody else really kind of want to bring anything else to my attention about it. It looks like I do have a message from Monroe County Kelly Moving virtually, fantastic idea. Logistics get in the way. You did. Yeah. Monroe ended up being all in person. Okay, I didn't realize that. Well, I'm stealing your thunder now, Kelly. Didn't do any virtual sessions. We ran into issues where we only had so many laptops. Okay. Yeah. So will there be any funding to help sites access Blackboard? Yeah. So my hope is yes, Kelly. And so there's a lot. I mean, that's a perfect example. Monroe completely intended to do a blended model. They turned in their curriculum content form. They identified all their homework. They identified all the things that they thought they could do in person versus virtual. And then when the time came, a lot of things got in the way, including technology and COVID scares, right? So you never know what you're going to be coming up against, at least right now. And for the foreseeable future, you know, I know there's talk out there of the vaccine, and I pray that this is going to be something that we are able to utilize soon. But let's face it, there's a lot of people that would have to get a vaccination. It's going to take a while, you know, and nobody really knows how long. But in the meantime, the work of our field has to go on. You're hiring people still, which is fantastic. You've got people who are just in limbo waiting for training. And so there's a lot here to consider, and I just want to make sure we get it right and don't cause more angst for folks. So thank you all for your comments. Okay, so I'm going to move on, and if there's more comments, we can certainly chat offline about those deliveries as you can ponder some of that information. But let me just start out. I don't know if I have folks from each site on the line, but Suffolk County, raise your hand if you're on the line for Suffolk County. I may not have anybody. Nassau County? There we go, Carrie, gotcha. Let me unmute you. Go ahead, Chair.
Hi, how are you? So we did ours in person. We only had 3 people. So we had enough room in our training room to spread out. I think for us, we would always probably do it in person because everybody is here.
Yeah.
So I don't think, you know, for us, it's not really an issue as far as, you know, people coming from other counties with travel costs or whatnot. I mean, if we only have 1 or 2 people, we would, I don't know if we would do any less than 3. It was a little rough, but we finished and we got through it. So I don't know when we'll even be hiring again at this point either.
Thanks, Carrie. And just can you refresh my memory? Does Nassau County assign cases to the officers ahead of finishing the academy?
It depends. It depends on the class. We never did before. The last couple of classes we have, because we're always promised that we're going to get more. So rather than run 2 classes, we try to wait for the rest of the people. So people might get assigned to pretrial. They might get PSIs. They don't get like a supervision caseload, though.
Okay. Okay.
So this last group, because we were supposed to get 9 more, they went to pretrial and also 2 PSIs, but we never got the rest of the people. So.
Yeah, and Carrie actually got a chance to log in to some of the sessions that we held. I don't know if you wanted to comment, Carrie, on what you observed.
I did think that they went very good, but like you, I had some internet connection issues some of the days, and also I agree, like the 35 students just taking attendance some days would seem like it was a chore for you guys. You know, who was there, who was on, who was listening, who raised their hand, who unraised their hand. So I think that a smaller, you know, group probably would be better for the online classes too.
For sure. Thank you. And thank you for all that feedback and for participating.
Oh, no problem.
All right. How about New York City? Do I have a representative on from New York City? Looking for a hand raised. Okay. How about Westchester? Daniela, are you with us? All right. Trying to unmute you, Daniela, but don't seem to be able to. So I'm going to move you up to be a panelist, and you should be able to speak now. Are you with us? Daniela, you may want to check your audio connection. I don't show you connected to audio at all, although I do see you on the WebEx and I do see your hand. So I'm going to give you a minute and come back to you. When you come in, you should be able to be heard, so just be aware.
She's one of the call-in users, Patty.
Oh, okay.
We can unmute them. We'll figure out who she is.
Daniela, is this you?
Can you hear me?
How about now?
We hear you.
I think it's not yet. Okay.
Hey, how are you?
Good.
Sorry about that. How are you?
No. Good.
Westchester, we did it in person, as you know, and it went pretty well, but it was 15 of us, and it was stressful because we were obviously, you know, doing everything with COVID restrictions, but all in all, it was successful just to do it in person, and the attendees were really appreciative. It was Rockland, Putnam, and Westchester for a total of 15 trainees, and it was great. It was pretty great.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for continuing to allow some of the other counties to come in. I know that that's very much appreciated, especially now. So I can't say enough.
Well, we enjoy it that way, so.
Yeah, well, it makes it more interesting, right? When you have different perspectives coming in.
Yeah.
And Daniela, am I right that Westchester is one of the counties that does not assign staff to caseloads prior to training?
No, we assign caseloads before training. Unfortunately, we're usually in such particularly right now, we've been in such a bind being short-staffed. So we had a lot of retirements. So our staff tends to have caseloads. I'm trying to think where they've been. It's spread out. It's been spread out to all the units.
Yeah, maybe it's New York City. Hopefully somebody's going to jog my memory, but I know that I've heard this before. I didn't make it up.
Well, we talked about it. I actually asked you about it about a year ago. We talked about it in February, I think, of 2019, or maybe even the end of the previous year, because I was wondering how do people navigate that?
Yeah. I think it's an ideal that if we could reach it, it would really solve a lot of problems for a lot of people. But okay, well, Thank you for sharing that report.
Sure.
Monroe, Kelly, are you our girl here who's gonna speak? I'm gonna unmute you.
Yes, ma'am. How are you?
Doing well, thank you.
So we ended up doing it all in person because we had every intention of doing it virtual, and as much as we knew like this is going to be a challenge because it's the first time ever doing it like that, we felt kind of comfortable with the preparation that we went through with OPCA, kind of showing us the ropes and, kind of talking us through some of the modules. So we intended to go forward with that. But last minute, literally, people were coming forward and there's been like, oh, I didn't know that I needed to have a camera. And it's just like, well, okay. And we found out that we didn't have the right resources. So between the students that needed this or that piece or this piece or whatever, and instructors who needed a piece of equipment, we didn't have the right resources. And rather than fight that tide and try to make it happen anyway, we just realized we have one large computer lab. We are only Monroe County students, so we're all around each other anyway. We were able to socially distance in that room, and so we made that happen by doing it in person. So we didn't actually get the opportunity to kind of see the difference between doing it in person and online.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm glad you were able to get through it and get through it safely. And, you improvised. You had to do what you had to do. But you also were one of the kind of mainstays in terms of when we were doing all of our review sessions. So I appreciated that you were there, and, it sounds like you were ready to go, given some of the information that we were sharing. And we're actually going to be collecting from each of the sites that ran academies. I'll be reaching out to you. Your feedback overall on how things just went in terms of timing of the curriculum. Because again, we piloted this together in different ways, but we all piloted this together. And keep in mind, we still have not yet brought this back to the MPTC for their final approval, nor do I plan to until I hear from each of you what you think. I know for us, we look at some of the timings on those modules and decided, you know, this is much too short of a time frame, or in some cases there was too much time allotted to it. So other than the, you know, the nitty-gritty details about particular activities or whatever, the things that the MPTC looks at are topics, the number of hours, and the learning objectives. And if so there was any portion of those three things that we need to hone in on, I want to do that and get it correctly, you know, nailed down. We will probably end up having to present an in-person and a virtual option to MPTC for their approval in both worlds, because we're still operating on what was supposed to be a very temporary approval. When we finished in the spring, it with all of our in-person academies, and we were going to be meeting again with them. Of course, they have a meeting next month, and we're not going to have everything finalized. It'll probably be next year, early next year when they meet, that we'll present to them. But in the meantime, I'm going to be taking in everything that you all have to tell me about how we need to make some edits to that. So thank you very much, Kelly, for all of those efforts. All right, and how about Erie County? Who do I have to report out from Erie? You can give me a hand. There we go. I see you, Glenn and Aaron. Okay, go ahead.
Hey, Patty. Yeah, we did an in-person September, October, spread out over 6 weeks. Just Erie County folks, unfortunately, we couldn't get a space large enough to accommodate out-of-county folks and social distancing guidelines. So we had to pare it down to just our folks. So we did a class of 12, and it worked out well. You know, usual, you know, road bumps with anything new, but because of the new material or a lot of the instructors. But we had some real highlights as well. I mean, there were parts of it that came across very good and got rave reviews, you know, topic and material-wise. So it was good. You know, just to back up on the technology, the virtual piece, some road bumps that we see are the same that others would see in the equipment, technology equipment. You know, like even doing our class, if we were to do 12 virtually, I'm not sure we could have run if we had 12 laptops that would accommodate it.
Yeah, that's the other thing, right? I mean, everybody had to supply their own equipment on the other end, right? So, you know, we had our equipment battle, but then everybody else, you know, had to do the same thing. So there is that side of the coin, and those are all things that, you know, we really kind of need to take into account as we move forward. And there's a couple things in the chat that I'm trying to just digest here, a couple suggestions about blended sessions with regional training. I mean, everything is on the table here. And then expecting new hires have the training in advance of beginning duties. I would suggest quarterly sessions, if not more frequently. Yeah, and so I think in my, go ahead.
Oh, if Erin is here with me, and she, you know, she spent a lot of time with you in the initial sessions. So that was very helpful to us so that someone was on top of the new material. And we have lots of notes that we'll be able to get with you on. You know, I guess given, like everybody else, given the two, we would prefer an in-person over a virtual, and more so something just so you can read people, like you can get a feel for the new staff coming in and what strengths and weaknesses and quirks that might come with them. You know, so.
Absolutely, Glenn, that's so true. You do lose that. I mean, there are some features. And so as one of the things, for example, I'm looking at right now, in WebEx training, we could see the student's name if there was a red exclamation point next to their name, which is something that only the host and panelists can see. I know that that person is not paying attention. I know that they have moved on and they're looking at something else, which is also why it's not to be, you know, like a jerk and be sneaky, but it's the way to replace what you're describing as an in-person thing, right? We have to have means. And, you know, we certainly weren't, you know, immediate. We often would call on that student just to make sure that they were with us. But it wasn't ever done in a way of like, I know you're not paying attention, I see the red exclamation point, you know? But that was kind of, I think, the WebEx training platform's way of being able to kind of overcome that obstacle.
Now, while Erin and I were chatting here while you were talking about the virtual and the class sizes, I mean, maybe an option for that too is if you have, like if you become a central database for the people that need it across the state and then can farm it out to different localities to do a virtual training, you know, to take the direction of that.
I couldn't agree with you more, and I was actually just having this conversation with as many people who would actually entertain my thoughts. And so I just feel like we have such a large network across the state of very capable trainers, and the needs vary wildly. You know, some folks hire very regularly, some folks hire once in a blue moon, and everything in between. And so, especially virtually, although my first thought was standing up physical academies across the state, like 9 or 10 of them. And so that there was never a gap of time that would have to go by where an department hired, you could immediately send somebody into an academy. And so my mind now is trying to work in the virtual realm, which may actually be more conceivable than standing up physical buildings or trying to find space during COVID. But if we were able to pool all of our resources together and collectively run academies, and right, we would kind of be the hub and coordinate that, that would be a dream. So I'm happy. If anybody else is kind of feeling that, if you want to work with me on that, I've actually started a concept paper in my spare time, which, by the way, if you hear a little one running around, I'm currently also a part-time kindergarten teacher because my daughter's school closed. So as of today, she's home with me. But yeah, so that is something that's been on the back of my mind, is trying to figure out how do we do this? How do we pull all these resources together and be able to serve everybody immediately? So thank you for your time.
Yeah, and I was kind of thinking of it partly selfishly too, because we're in a spot now where we don't foresee any hiring for a period of time. Goodness knows how long that'll be. But I would like to keep my instructors active, you know, and it's a way for us to continue to do it while maybe helping out some of the regional counties around us, and if we're able to do it.
Right, absolutely, Glenn. I couldn't agree with you more. Thank you both, and to you and Erin for everything. I do see that Deputy Commissioner Macarone is with us. So, Bob, I'm going to unmute you and let you have a chance to speak to the group.
Thank you, Patty. And you can hear me okay?
We can.
Great. So I apologize for being late. I just voted on the ICAOS Rules Committee with respect to a national standard for warrant issuance of warrants with respect to absconders and individuals who commit felony offenses, as well as behavior requiring retaking. So move that forward, and earlier we had the New York State Council for the Interstate Compact meeting, our semi-annual meeting. So it's been a busy day, but wow, what a group together. Here I'm seeing 29 attendees and a number of hosts, a great group, and I'll be very brief. I hope that you and your staff and your families are safe. I think probation continues to do great work. I want to quote the governor in saying that we're really tired of the coronavirus, but unfortunately it is not tired of us. And so please take every precaution with you and your families during the holiday season, particularly around Thanksgiving. And I do want to wish each and every one of you and your families and staff a happy Thanksgiving. God knows we have so much to be grateful for living in this great country. On the training front, I do want to acknowledge the leadership of Patty Clements and her training team and actually carrying off, completing the virtual fundamentals of probation practice for the last 2 weeks, which, you know, albeit got extended to 3 to 4 weeks. But here's the point with this. What we learned is that more time is required in a virtual training. And I know I interrupted your conversation on the subject, and you've probably already had this. But the truth is, we did not cheat the candidates. Our probation officers in that class received high-quality training. And we didn't do away with anything. We didn't eliminate anything. They got really first-class training, and that's important. Going ahead, hopefully the vaccine's in place. Wouldn't that be great? And to have that in effect in March, where we can all convene at DCJS and continue to enjoy each other's professionalism. But that may not be the case, and that's why Patty is preparing for the worst-case scenario, because we absolutely understand that there are people who need to be trained. Understanding, of course, that these are strange fiscal times, you know, and that you haven't even heard back on your probation aid. I know that. I'm thinking that the governor is very hopeful that with the 4th CARES Act, there'll be funding available to states and localities to help offset the enormous burdens financially that they've dealt with. And so hopefully that will result in, you know, less of an impact on localities. But I want to say this, we are cognizant that you haven't received word on state aid. We hope to move that conversation. We're in daily conversations with budget. We did hear some good news that we are working on a letter to counties for Raise the Age funding. So you should know that. If you hired staff with Raise the Age, you should be getting notification for reapplication. It would be a simple reapplication, by the way. That'll be in the next week or two. So we are making progress on a number of fronts. I know there's not going to be a lot of rehiring going on, given the state, you know, fiscal situation and the fiscal situation of localities, but there will be probation officers who need training, and we see that in the academies, and we see it at the state level, and certainly we're going to do our share. So I'll stop now, and I'll listen in and give the reins back to Patty. And again, happy Thanksgiving. Be safe out there.
Thank you, Bob. I appreciate that. Okay, so let's move on to our agenda. I think we've covered the FPP report out. And again, if there's more conversation that you want to have offline about that, I'm certainly willing to entertain it and listen to your ideas. I appreciate them. So as far as the training unit, what we are working on right now, so we've hosted recently the New York Compass training for trainers with Equivant, formerly North Point, and that was run in October, kind of simultaneously with FPP. We developed 12 new trainers, and we're now going to be reaching out to those folks. Actually, I think David may have already done so, to start offering some end-user training. I know that David just today started to send some correspondence out to kind of just assess those who've been trained and have trainers on staff, what the plan is for you to execute that in your own department. So internally, you know, who's using it, who started that training up, and who can we call on to kind of make this more regional. So you should be hearing from him if you haven't already.
Patty, it didn't go out just yet, but stay tuned. You'll be getting that email very shortly, within the next day or tomorrow at the latest.
Perfect. Thank you, David. And then we also have some other things planned, and these are all, of course, virtual deliveries. Our fiscal year, just as a reminder, will end March 31st, 2021. So we're going to be pushing these things out pretty fast and furious. But we intend, matter of fact, I had a solicitation out right now for the Status 99R. I know we haven't done this training in a very long time. And we've heard over the years that this is something that the field is really in need of. So right now the bid is out. I'm hoping by the end of November to have selected a vendor, and we should be able to offer that in the beginning part of 2021. Probably the max might be 2 online deliveries, although I'm hoping to be able to offer 3 depending on the cost, of course. In addition to that, we also have officer wellness, and I believe I have either Gary or Danielle. Gary, can I just unmute you to just make a comment about the officer wellness? Just the status of that.
Sure. Good afternoon. This is something that I think, Danielle has, communicated, to the probation departments about for quite some time. And again, this has been kind of an ongoing, priority for DCJS, OPCA, even prior to COVID. Obviously, there were some challenges, but we are working with one of the, organizations that basically does a certification of, peer support trainers, basically, to do that. So that's kind of in the process right now. We're tentatively looking at some February dates, but, some additional information will be forthcoming when that is finalized. So, you can look forward to some further information on that.
Perfect. Thanks, Gary. And for those of you who weren't aware, we actually now have, I think it's called staff wellness in our fundamentals curriculum. That was actually taught by some of the members, Danielle Rendies, the primary, and Alden Saddlemeyer from our office, delivered that module. And I know the rest of you did it in your own houses. But that was a new addition, and it was one of those modules that we definitely got some good feedback on, and I'm hoping you all did too. Very much needed. So that is also coming. Interactive journaling, we're actually going to add to this list because I made this agenda and then I had just a wild hair thought. So we're able to actually probably provide interactive journaling facilitator as well as another round of train the trainer. And so I would expect we're in negotiations now with the change companies and trying to just get some contracting done. All of these are probably going to roll out after December just because of the need to develop a contract. But you would see the train the trainer in both Courage to Change and Forward Thinking, and then subsequently, or maybe even in concert with, you'll see some facilitator training. The facilitator training is going to be another one of those similar to New York Compass and how David ran the DVSIR model, where we train folks and then we use those boots on the ground to run those trainings. So if we haven't reached out to you yet, we will be on this one as well to get our trainers kind of deployed out there to offer the facilitator training. So both of those on the IJ side will be offered. The DVSIR end user, David, do you want to comment on that?
Sure, thank you, Patty. So we do have intentions to deliver at least one or two more of the DVSIR end user trainings within the next 2 to 3 months. But even before we do that, we are going to do some additional training via a WebEx. I don't expect it to be very long, but we're going to, Colleen Thorne and myself need to follow up with all the folks who've already been trained and provide them with additional training on the summary risk rating items, because what we're seeing from the reports we're receiving from OIJ is that while a number of these screens are being completed throughout departments over the state, there's a couple questions that are not being completed. So we're going to be doing additional training with that before we do any other end user DVSIR trainings. So keep an eye out for that. Hope to do that sometime next month, and we'll be putting an announcement out there in the near future once Colleen and I get all the things together for it, for that training. So more to come with that, and we've got everybody in the state now trained with the exception of one department who we hope to get trained in the very near future, and then every probation department has at least one person certified to use the DVSIR, and we hope to get more trained as we keep rolling out these trainings in the months to come.
Perfect. Thank you, David. And then the New York Compass end user I've already mentioned. Basic motivational interviewing, we've contracted last year with the Virali group, and that contract kind of got interrupted, right, with COVID, as did everything else. So They've now converted their in-person training to a virtual platform. We ran a training last week, and the second one is running this week. It'll finish up on Friday, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Thursday or Friday. So we've had 2 cohorts of 15 maximum in those classes. From what I hear, everything went really well last week, and it's going well this week. We are hoping to be able to do some additional work there. There's not yet an advanced version of that virtual, nor is there the train the trainer. So those are the 3 components of our current contract. And some of us have already experienced the basic MI train the trainer right back in February, I think it was. All but a few of our sites now have that training under our belts. But those academies who weren't able to participate back then, we were hoping to be able to offer another. I can tell you that in my conversations with David Virali and his team, they are more than willing to do it. It's just that there's the concern that we all have with the in-person variety. And so right now, it's downstate counties that need this training. And with the numbers being what they are, he's being very cautious. I believe we have a conversation, if not tomorrow, definitely before the end of the week, to trying to talk this out with them. But we certainly don't want to put anybody in jeopardy. So, you know, we don't know exactly what we're going to do with the train the trainer, but we do know we have the capability to run some more basic motivational interviewing virtually. So we will be offering additional classes, and we'll probably announce those dates within a week or 2. Also, if you remember Maisie, back in the beginning of 2020, we finished up, I think we did 6 sessions. We had 2 more that were part of our contract. And we've been in conversations with University of Massachusetts to try and get these scheduled. We were hoping to do it before the end of December, but the dates that their trainer were available were really closer to the beginning of December, and we just didn't feel like it was enough time to give you folks, so I've asked her for some January dates. So we will be putting out the notice about the 2 additional sessions. Again, we can take up to 100 people on those online sessions. And following those sessions, there'll also be quality assurance. So I know that there was this gap in time, right, with the requirement for Maisie, the pandemic. Some folks were using it, some folks weren't, and now we're just trying to like bridge this gap a little bit. So these 2 additional sessions, while they're limited to a total of 200 people, I would encourage folks who may have already taken it and just need the refresher to feel free to do that, and we'll do the best we can to get, you know, everybody through there. But the quality assurance piece, we're going to shore up with UMass a little bit more about how they want to handle that. It had always been intended to be a phone call, so, you know, the fact that we can't meet in person doesn't change anything with regard to that. But they're going to make themselves available to just follow up with departments after you've gotten a chance to get your feet wet and just give you some guidance and maybe some pointers about the policies that you would create it. You can revisit those after you've had some time to practice this. So that's what the quality assurance session is going to be. The other thing that didn't make the list, and it's out there right now, is we're doing our initial firearms training it starts November 30th and runs through the first week of December. Right now we've got, I believe, the only 5 people I was expecting to be in the class who have turned in their applications. But if you do have folks who need the initial firearms, the only caveat is we have to make sure that the folks who are coming have already gotten the 11 hours of use of force. And if you've come through our academy, you definitely have that. If you didn't and you've had it in close proximity, I think OPS is defining that within a year. We can talk about that, but just please know that that application is out there, and we're currently getting geared up for that class. And I think that's all, unless David or Jess, you have anything else to add for our unit.
I'll just add 2 things really quickly because we're also in the process. We want to be able to provide as many cognitive behavioral interventions to the departments as possible in training, and we're in the process of looking at T4C virtual training, which can also be delivered in a virtual format and facilitated in a virtual format to probationers. And the other one is decision points. We're hoping to also be able to do 1 or 2 virtual trainings for both of those cognitive behavioral interventions before April. And we're in the process of contracting and reaching out and doing all that behind the scenes stuff now. So just putting it out there for you guys.
Yeah, thank you, David. That's right. Sometimes we make these agendas in advance and then things happen so quickly around here. So yes, those are additional things that we're looking at. Okay, I'm now at the point to turn this over to our other managers. So Gary, I'm going to unmute you and ask you to go ahead and comment on the adult operations.
Thank you, Patty. Just a couple quick comments. Basically, my unit is going to be doing a webinar on November 30th regarding some of the new Caseload Explorer functionality specific to ignition interlock devices, as well as some of the reports that are available in the Integrated Justice Portal, again, tied into impaired driving initiatives. So the webinar really is, some information has previously gone out about this, but there was some new functionality introduced in Caseload Explorer that's really management tool type stuff. It's kind of measuring dates of receipt of orders and dates of receipt of notice from courts regarding violations of probation filed and warrants issued and so forth. And where this has come up is a couple places. When my staff has done quality assurance visits, there have been occasions where it's been departments were not aware that they never received an order from a court for an ignition interlock case. So we're looking for tools to kind of assess the timeliness of receipt of orders there, and also the statutory timeframes for processing violations of probation. And again, that statutory timeframe is not IID specific. It's violations of probation in general. But again, this came up through internal audit that when they reviewed some cases, those timeframes were not being followed. So it's really tools for supervisors and administrators to kind of look at, how long some of these processes are taking, and then conduct outreach to courts as necessary. The other reports that we're going to, again, cover on there for the Integrated Justice Portal are, there's a report that's available in the Reporting Services Suite of IID cases released from docs. So again, just a check to make sure that you are aware of the IID required cases coming out of docs. And then the other one that was rolled out recently that, there have been some issues with it and we're working to correct them, but it's basically a report of, DWI convictions and sentences, again, just to make sure that you are aware of the new cases that you should be receiving from a court. It's basically, a user-defined set of dates where, you can run the report and see all DWI convictions that DCJ has received and sentences. So those are really the things that we're going to be covering there. And just a couple other comments. David mentioned decision points. Many of you are probably aware that Michelle Melendez from my unit has previously reached out that there is an impaired driving version of decision points. So we have been working with the authors to try to bring that to New York as well. So we have funding for that through a GTSC grant, the Governor's Traffic Safety Committee grant. So we're optimistic that we will be able to deliver 2 classes for that decision points DUI facilitator training. So we're hopeful to do one in the spring and perhaps one, in the summer. And, again, they would likely be online as we are currently experiencing everything. And, it would probably be, 10 to 12 persons trained per class. So, again, these are costly trainings, but you should expect to be hearing more about that. And I guess that's all that really comes to mind to me at this point. The other thing that you might be hearing about in the near future is, and you may have already heard about it, but there's something available, through the Integrated Justice Portal called Arrest Alerts, and that's really a replacement for what was called a NICID subscription. And really, so we're looking to do a webinar with the DCJS Office of Public Safety on arrest alerts. And what it is it's basically kind of a hit notice, but it can be directed to a specific email address or text. And there's actually an app that you can get for iPhone or Android devices where you can get the information directly through an app. So there's a few different populations where we think this would be ideal, including cases that are not in IPER, so it doesn't produce hit notice that you would typically get, perhaps including pretrial cases, IID, conditional discharge cases that probation departments are monitoring, as well as, again, if you want some immediate response to, hot people, gun-involved cases. So there would be some opportunities for that too. So nothing set yet, but we do expect that to be forthcoming. So that's all that comes to mind to me right now, Patty, so thank you.
Great, thanks, Gary, appreciate that. Okay, Juvenile Operations, I believe we have Teresa Skanu-Hansen with us. So Teresa, go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone. So a couple of quick updates on the juvenile side of things. As you all may recall, in early 2020, we had moved forward with our collaborative casework coach training, and we had selected 30 coach candidates from throughout New York State's probation departments to be developed as CCW coaches by Orbis partners. Before COVID, we were able to complete 5 of those 30 coaches in Niagara, Chautauqua, and Erie. And if you may recall, this consisted of 2 days of in-person training, followed by an in-department session with the trainer from Orbis working one-on-one with this coach candidate. So then COVID came upon us and we had to postpone the sessions with the remaining 25 coach candidates. We've had some movement on this project, which is super exciting for my team. We will be talking with Orbis Friday morning and their trainers to plan the next steps moving forward to deliver this virtually. We have asked Orbis to develop the design for that, and they are delivering it. So we will be reaching out to those remaining 25 coach candidates to discuss what we learned from Orbis about the virtual environments for both the small group coach training followed by the one-on-one individual coach training on the case files within their own departments. So expect to hear more, and we'll keep directors in that loop as well, as I know many may not easily recall this project because several months have passed. But we're super excited that more departments will have the benefit of these collaborative casework coaches internally to support other probation officers and peers in really refining their assessments and their goals and action steps towards really targeted case plans. So it's really good stuff. Stay tuned for what we learned Friday morning. We'll be moving this quickly. Our intention is to complete this in the first quarter of calendar year 2021. So really by the end of March, our goal is to be complete. So more to come there. And then with regard to Yazi, e-training accounts, just as a reminder, remain available. Those requests can be submitted through our shared email account, which is opcayazi@dcjs.ny.gov. Juvenile Operations monitors those incoming emails. So for any of your staff that are new or transitioning into juvenile probation, feel free to make that request. That's the online 8 to 10 hours, depending on how quickly one proceeds through that training. You can stop and start as staff are available to participate or not, but users do get unique logins that are good for, I think, 90 days. And just on a separate note, it's not on the agenda, Patty, but just a reminder that Yazzie Caseworks only currently functions properly in Internet Explorer as a web browser. If you do try to open Yazzie Caseworks in, for example, Chrome will display a flag that gives you an alert of the problem, but we've heard from departments that this isn't always in the forefront of their mind. Just know Orbis is working to transition Yazzie Caseworks to Chrome. We will keep you posted on that. But at this time, it's really essential that all probation departments are opening Yazzie inside of Internet Explorer. And we'll be in touch soon about that transition for the web browsers. And that's it from Juvenile Operations.
Great. Thank you so much, Teresa. I appreciate that. I don't believe we have anyone from the interstate unit on with us. Could be wrong, but I don't see anyone. So from the manager of that unit, Matt Charton, he's explained to me that they're still continuing to review the work. The work groups are still reviewing the changes to Part 349, and that they do plan some December dates yet to be announced for new ICOP user training, as well as their quarterly WebEx series that they've been running for quite some time on various topics. And so that is really it for Interstate. So Nicole Alvey, are you with us here, or is anyone here? Taylor, are you taking the ATI? Can you raise your hand if you're speaking for them? I'll just unmute you. Are you speaking for the ATI unit? Sorry, Taylor.
She's in the VER unit, Patty.
You're in there. My bad. Who's here with the ATI unit? Anyone? Okay. So I guess I will take this. So they are in the process of revising and developing a new Fundamentals of Community Corrections training curriculum. This is kind of a spin-off of the Fundamentals of Probation Practice, but geared more toward the ATI reentry communities. And I know that they've been working very hard on trying to get this curriculum revised. So that is ongoing. They've also been conducting a series of lunch and learns. And I know that they're planning on a new set of trainings coming out. So those of you who maybe had a chance to participate in these, they've been very informative. So her and her team have been doing a fantastic job. And similarly, they've been running a series of informational exchanges for various ATI programs that we fund. And these are really designed to be able to kind of share ideas and strategies around how to navigate through the COVID pandemic and still provide the services to all the folks that they're serving out in the community, as well as, you know, how to work with one another and meet their grant requirements. So I know that they've run a series of those. CCDS, I'm not entirely sure what this is, but this is another series of WebEx trainings that they're doing in cooperation with our research office, the Office of Justice and Research Performance. And then finally, they've been conducting, along with our partners in funding, some virtual site visits. So these are for contract holders who have site visit requirements, and this is part of their contractual requirements. These are all being conducted virtually. So I apologize if there was someone who was planning on speaking on behalf of ATI, but I took it for you. So now I'm going to turn this over. I see Michelle Clark is here for the VER unit. Michelle, sorry, I tried to put Taylor in the wrong unit. I apologize for that.
Hi, everyone. Yes, so just really briefly, I also just wanted to mention with the ATI unit, we partnered with them to do the 6 lunch and learns this past, well, over the past couple of months in October and November, and we had a great turnout, and it was really nice to see a lot of people participating. And we conducted lunch and learns that were specific to client engagement, managing, referral sources, et cetera, things of that nature. and we really appreciated the partnership with everyone on that. And with respect to the CCDS WebEx trainings with the Office of Justice and Research Performance, just to go back to one other thing with ATI, we're all working together within OJRP, OPCA, to help grantees best enter their data in the Community Corrections Database System application, which is what CCDS stands for. So that's some important work that we're going to be doing moving forward. So I just wanted to say that really, really quickly before I moved on to the VARE unit pieces here. Oh, no problem, no problem. So we are developing a webinar as we speak to train probation departments, ATI programs, employment-focused services programs, and county reentry task forces to use our new web-based vocation education resource map. This is something that we're going to reveal to everyone hopefully in December and have our webinar tutorial to show you all the functionality of that interactive resource map with Taylor Alfred as the lead on that project from the VARE unit in December. So we're looking forward to that. We also have training. Yeah, I mentioned the Lunch and Learns already. That was also part of what Nicole's unit, the ATI unit, prepared. And also to mention that we are going to be partnering with the ATI unit again to deliver more beginning early 2021. If Frank Cangiano from the VARE unit is on the call now, he could speak to the virtual ODES training as well as retention counts. So can we see if he's on the call?
He was here.
If he's not, I can do it.
I don't see him any longer.
Okay, no problem. So the virtual ODES training it's something that Frank Cangiano, the manager of the ODES training program, has been working on for several months with the NCDA, with NIC, and also with several of our ODES trainers throughout the state. And classes are due to begin on December 14th. He sent out the applications for ODES training, and those applications are going to be due back, I think, November 30th, or they could have been, that date could have been extended to the beginning of December. If you have any questions at all about the ODES training, please contact Frank Cangiano at OPCA. Frank is also working on a training webinar for the curriculum Retention Counts, which is an employment retention curriculum that can be delivered by people who are already certified OWDS. And he is hoping to deliver that webinar in early 2021. Thank you, Patty.
Sure. Thank you, Michelle. I appreciate that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm just going to open it up for any other business that folks want to bring up. If you want to raise your hand or put something in the chat, I'm happy to entertain that conversation. Okay. So I have a question here about an FPP waiver. Did I clarify? Bill, let me unmute you so that I can understand exactly what you're asking me. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, there was I believe law dictates that there's a finite period of time where somebody needs to get the FPP training completed. And I believe that there was a waiver that was done. Now we have 3 officers that are beyond a year right now, and I'm just wondering if that waiver's been extended.
Yeah, so, Audrey, hold on a second. So basically what we've done is that it's a regulation, it's an OPCA regulation that requires that new officers be trained within 6 months of hire. You are accurate. What we have done since the COVID pandemic, and I believe we issued this in March or April, we've actually kind of just halted that regulation requirement. We still have other regulatory requirements like the 21 continuing credits that you need to do annually for each officer, but the requirement to train within 6 months is actually currently on hold. We will probably be revisiting that and maybe in the beginning of the year, depending on how things are moving here. But currently, as we are speaking, Bill, that is still on hold. And most of that is because we ourselves weren't able to offer anything for you to be able to meet that regulation. So we are going to revisit it, but you are not in in jeopardy of being non-compliant with the regulation if you have officers that have gone beyond that 6 months.
Okay, thank you.
You're very welcome. Any other business? Michelle, you have your hand raised.
Nope. Just to let you know I was here. I apologize.
No worries, no worries. Okay. So if there is no other business, I'm going to just note that our next meeting, and I did, by the way, attach the 2021, can't believe I'm saying that, training committee meeting schedule in the email that went out for this meeting. I attached that to you, but the next meeting is February 16th. It will still be from 1 to 3, and from there we typically do February, May, August, November. So we're going to stay on that track. If anyone would like to stay on the line and discuss things that maybe I didn't get to in the chat box,
Patty,
just want to talk a little more. Yeah.
Melissa Lax has her hand up, raised.
Oh, okay, Melissa, I apologize. Let me get you in there. Go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify being able to do the fundamentals in the 6 months to the year is waived, but the CPL requirement of having the peace officer training still stands, correct? So, which basically is we can't do a standalone peace officer training because it's part of fundamentals.
There is no standalone peace officer training any longer. The peace officer training is the Fundamentals Academy in its entirety.
Right. So
there's no more separation.
So we cannot have these trainees, even if they get trained in taser, pepper spray, or firearms, they still cannot carry or act in the capacity of a peace officer because they don't have the peace officer training. Correct?
That is correct. That is correct. Okay. And Director Macarone has his hand raised, so I believe he wants to comment on that. Go ahead, Bob.
Thank you, Patty. So that's Part 346, I believe, and Patty's quite right. We'll be getting back to the departments after the first of the year. I would imagine one of the things we probably want to do is just do a quick survey of the departments to see where they are with respect to training their officers and get a sense of the compliance and, you know, what that difference is, the delta there in terms of who needs to be trained. But departments should be very careful not to have untrained officers act as probation officers, particularly, of course, when they're not properly trained for weapons possession. So, you know, you'd have an enormous liability on the county if that were the case. So please be mindful of that while we're trying to be flexible, understanding that we can't complete all the necessary trainings, this is also a time for counties to be very careful in the responsibilities they're assigning probation officers until such time as we can weigh in on that. And I do expect that'll be job one for January 2021.
Yeah, thank you. So, and Melissa, you also put a comment in the chat about firearms training that, if you don't mind, I'll address now. Essentially, as I understand it, the Office of Public Safety is given some kind of latitude, and I'm saying maybe up to a year, but you certainly want to clarify that with them. They govern this part of the equation. But, for example, with the initial firearms course that OPCA is going to be holding, we send our folks to the Docs Academy, and their staff train the officers that we send. Having said that, there are portions of the community corrections field, and Docs is one of them, that are not privy to having, I shouldn't say privy, they're not required to have the 11 hours of use of force. So people like the sheriff's office, you know, the jails and things of that nature, they don't have to have that requirement. They're still able to do 7 hours. And so where this comes into play is if you're sending people to a firearms course to one of those places, you have to make sure that the 11 hours is being taught, because as probation officers, we have a different requirement. So what OPS has done for us is we offer the full 11 hours of use of force in the academy. And as long as we're sending people to the firearms course in short order, they can take that course, and the use of force component is not part of it because they can't train on the 11 hours. So they're coming in with the 11 hours from FPP, doing firearms training, and OPS is marrying those two things. But they will not do that beyond a certain point, right? So if you have people who've done 11 hours of use of force, maybe in your own in-service training, and then you want to send them to another firearms training, you're going to want to make sure that OPS will connect those dots, that the period of time hasn't gone by. And it's been very kind of fluid. They have said to me maybe up to a year. There's nothing really written in statute for us to hang our hats on. So we're trying to be very careful about how we navigate that with folks. But Melissa, I'm happy to connect you with the folks at OPS who kind of govern that part of it and walk you through any part of that. But it's been a problem for some counties out there who've sent folks and then found out that they weren't actually certified.
Yeah, so we had done, you know, we do the 11 hours, we do pepper spray, in-house, taser, and firearms. And what was happening is the people that were here less than a year, they were issuing certificates for. And those that were employed here over a year, they are not issuing certificates for. Because what they're saying is, like, you kind of get this, like, temporary peace officer status for a year, but then you, like, lose it after the year. So all the people that were certified are, like, no longer certified kind of thing because they didn't do the peace officer status, peace officer training at fundamentals. So I know some departments kind of were like, oh, well, we do the training, we give it to them. And I'm like, well, you really can't give it to them because then they're not peace officers. So you do one part, the use of force, and the actual weapon, whatever that may be, but you're missing that third piece of peace officer. Back in the day, it was a standalone course, which is not anymore. So now all those people that are here, we no longer, you know, we can't give them the weapons, and DCJS is withholding those certificates in the time being until I guess I don't know that we'd have to redo the training, but I do think they just won't issue it until they do the peace officer.
And that's new, Melissa. I didn't know that they weren't issuing certificates. That is fairly a new development. So I can check back with OPS on that. My understanding was at the time of hire, you're sworn in, you're a peace officer. However, until you receive the training, meaning the entire academy, you cannot perform peace officer functions. Okay? So while before I believe that they could attend the training, they couldn't actually go out and carry the weapon until they received the academy. And it sounds like now they're not even allowing you to, well, they may allow you to attend the training, but they won't certify you until you do the academy.
If you've been employed over that year and you're utilizing the waiver to not do it, then those people, because they gave it to some and they won't give it to others.
Gotcha. And so probably the best thing to do, and you know what, I can put this in the chat. I'm going to give the email of the person that you can speak to more about this. Her name is Sarah Dean, and I'm providing her email right now in the chat if you want to utilize this.
I can talk to Sarah. That's kind of how we got to the clarity of, like, how some do and how some don't. And I understand it. The years lapsed. The CPL is a CPL. There's no waiver to that law, so it is what it is. So really, the idea is just we have to get our people into fundamentals ASAP.
Yeah, I know. It's crazy. Let me see what else I got here. Training weapons, the officer.
Looks like we may have to run a virtual class just for Orange County.
We would be able to fill it. We got like 11 people.
I saw that.
Yeah, so I'm trying to navigate some more chats here. I know that I'm on the ACADIS portal. It's showing my 3 officers in question have X number of days. Will OPCA advise ACADIS personnel? Thank you for bringing that to my attention, Bill. I had no idea. We actually at OPCA do not have access to ACADIS, so I have no way of knowing that. So I am actually going to take that down, and I can get back to you on that. So Bill's comment is telling me that in ACADIS, it's saying that there are officers who basically are in this pending status, and they have you know, a certain number of days to complete fundamentals because they aren't obviously accommodating for the fact that we have kind of halted that. So now I understand where your question was coming from more clearly. So let me find that out, and I can send that out to, I'll send it out to all directors and SEOs when I get the answer for that.
And Patty, if that's the case, maybe they can generate a list for us off of the ACADIS database, and we can prioritize based off of if it's got a date on it as to when
Correct.
it's pending for folks getting
Correct.
into the virtual classes.
Yep. Okay. Anybody else have any comments, questions? All right, awesome. You guys have been a wonderful audience. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.